Hey guys, we're here. It's October the 9th, 2020, Friday. So happy Friday, first of all. We're going to talk about the collapse of the last Chinese dynasty and the rise of who replaces the dynastic rulers of China. And that's going to be a group of people that we call the Nationalists. The flag that you see in the background right there, that is the flag of the Nationalist Party. It is also now the flag of the country and kind of country. And it's a little bit of a complex relationship, but we're going to address that of the island of Taiwan, which you identified the very first day we talked about China on the geography map. If you remember, it is kind of to the southeast of mainland China, below to the south of Japan, not crazy far from, say, Shanghai or Hong Kong. All right. So we're going to move forward. And the Juna, which obviously you did already, or hopefully you've done already, is going to just be kind of a quick refresher. And the two questions I had for you there is what was the last dynasty in China? And that would be the Qing, Qing. I know you're going to be like, what? So it's not Qing or anything like that. Nope, it's Qing. Qin is a chin sound in Chinese as you translate it back into English. And so that's where we get the Qing dynasty, as well as the Qin dynasty, where we get the name of China, China. All right. And the second question I had for you is in what year did it collapse? And you should have gotten 1911 for that. If you didn't, that's fine. That's why we're here, right? We're going to kind of correct all those things and work on that. All right. We have three key terms. The first key term we're going to have here is provincial, not provincial, which I usually hear at least once a year. Provincial. If something is provincial, it means local, at least in our terminology or the way we're going to be using it today in class. Provincial can also be kind of like a derogatory term for someone saying they're kind of maybe uncultured, uneducated, untraveled, but we're not using that, just giving you a little extra variation. The second key term is going to be the word commodities. Commodities are marketable products, things that can be bought or sold. And lastly is communism, and we're going to talk in more depth about communism next week. But communism, very roughly, is a political theory developed by a German man by the name of Karl Marx, as well as with the help of another man, Joseph Engels, in the mid 1800s. And it is a political theory that advocates for a classless society, which means that there is no rich, there's no poor, there's no middle class. And to get there, we would have a class war where the poor would overthrow the wealthy, or the workers overthrow the factory owners is another way to look at it. Or as they call it, the proletariat would get rid of the patrician class people, or the bourgeois, to use the French term, the bourgeoisie, excuse me, said that wrong. And that everyone would be paid roughly equally for their contributions to society. We're going to get into more depth about that, but I just want to introduce that idea. And we can go into more detail, and you can ask more questions about that next week. All right, so we're going to move on, and we're going to talk about some of the nationalists and who they are, and we're going to talk about this man on the left, and that man on the left right here, this guy, is a man by the name of Sun Yat-sen. All right, and Sun Yat-sen was a nationalist, and he wanted to overthrow the Qing dynasty. There was a kind of a growing movement within all of China to get rid of the Qing and the dynastic system as a whole, and Sun Yat-sen wanted to overthrow the Qing and replace them with democracy, right? In case you kind of are not remembering what democracy is a form of government in which people elect their leaders, similar to the United States. I know we can get more complex about that, about how we actually elect our leaders. But for all intents and purposes, we are a democracy. And this is kind of a similar system that Sun Yat-sen and the Nationalists wanted to impose. In October of 1911, there is an uprising in the Emperor Henry Puyi, who hold that name in the back of your brain. He's going to make an appearance in a few days, kind of coming back. Also known as the boy emperor, the child emperor, is overthrown. And over 4,000 years of dynastic rule of China is overthrown. Just like that, right? History is the coming and going of things. And at some point, things go, right? So 4,000 years ago, the first Chinese rulers unified China. They expand the empire over 4 millennia, and then it just ends, and there's an overthrowing of that power. All right. And the man who is replacing the emperor is the first leader of this newly nationalist, somewhat democratic China, or hopefully democratic China, is going to be the man on the left. And what his name is he's a general. His name is General Yun Shigai. He is selected by Sun Yat-sen as going to be the leader of China, respected, very strong-willed man. However, he didn't understand democracy, even though he was selected to be the leader of a democratic country. He wanted to rule through terror, through murder, getting rid of his political opponents, getting rid of people who might have been against his rule or his ideas. So not exactly the guy you want leading your country when you're supposed to be a democracy. Um, when he dies 5 years after the fall of the Qing Dynasty in 1916, in the middle of the First World War. Sorry, I do know that World War One being 1914 to 1918. China falls into a civil war. All right. During this time, the the West. Okay, so the West is this term that we use for Europe and the Americas, right? So Canada, United States, Mexico, right? South America as well. And the East being Japan, China, the Koreas, India. So the East and the West. During the early 200s, excuse me, the 20th century, Western influence in China becomes much more prevalent and obvious. They bring technology. It is kind of a forced modernization of China. If you looked at this image, you would not think it would. It could be. You would think it could have been New York. It could have been London. It could have been Paris. It could have been Chicago. That is Shanghai, China. All right. It gives you an idea. You see modern cars. You see tram cars down here. If you look, these tram paths right here. You see telegram and telephone wires. Very modern looking. Uh, During this time, there is an exploitation of workers for wealth. I guess that's kind of a problem of capitalism and modernization. We can talk about that later on next week when we talk about capitalism as well as communism. And additionally, there is a rise in Western books, Western art, Western movies, kind of Western pop culture. The things that in the United States they would have been enjoying in the early 1900s become also enjoyed in China. By 1920, the government has kind of dissolved and fallen apart, and there's this ongoing struggle for control. And there are two parties competing to be the leaders of this new China, or what will become a new China. The Nationalist Party, led by Sun Yat-sen, and the Communist Party. All right, and we're going to talk about their struggle between each other. Ultimately, these two sides kind of come to an understanding. While, yes, they both want to control China, they're at risk of falling under the influence of neighboring countries, foreign countries, who may see China again as a colony. In fact, the United States considered the possibility of parts of China becoming kind of American colonies in the early 1900s. So what happens in 1921, the Chinese Communist Party, the Communist Party that still rules China to this day, is formed in the city of Shanghai. They are formed with the support of the Soviet Union, today's Russia, essentially, also a communist nation. And the communists throw their support behind Sun Yat-sen. The idea being this, that the nationalists, with the help of the communists, will be able to overthrow any warlords that are trying, individuals who are individually trying to conquer China. And they'll also be able to drive out foreign powers that may be trying to have influence power in China. Though they are working together, there is not some mutual trust. They're not best friends. This is simply an arrangement for convenience. Basically, let's deal with these other people, and then we will settle our differences as well. Right? In 1923, in what we now call the Northern Expedition, the two armies combine, the two forces combine to form an army. It is during this time that in 1925, Sun Yat-sen dies and replaced by General Chiang Kai-shek, very important man in history, so keep that name kind of tucked away in the back of your brain. The army marches from south to north, and by the summer of 1926, they control much of China. You can see the march coming down here, all the way up into what is this now today's Beijing, up here. All right. But it's during this time that Chiang Kai-shek begins to kind of violate his agreement, or the nationalist agreement, with the communists. And in April of 1927, there is a massacre of the communists known as the Shanghai Massacre. It is a brutal massacre. It is mass beheadings. There are the mass beheadings are done publicly as a way to scare the remaining communists in Shanghai, in China, in a way to show the nationalist strength over China. So those who may not really have a side or may be more persuaded to join their side through violence. It's a pretty brutal time period. It is effective, though. The nationalists are able to consolidate and control China. He establishes this new Chinese Republic. He establishes their kingdom, their capital in the city of Nanjing, and the communists who are now outlawed and being persecuted, being punished for their political beliefs, are now forced into hiding. All right, this is Chiang Kai-shek right here. You don't have to look at these guys, so I'm going to kind of scroll through them. There's some beheadings, okay? And then I'm going to share with you for a closing a Kahoot game, okay? This is just a little review game for you to play. It's all going to be fun. It's just to get you ready, because I'm not saying you're going to have a quiz next week, but you're probably going to have a quiz next week on the Communists and the Nationalists, okay? That's pretty much it. I hope you understand all that. The timeline activity is going to take for some pretty solid reading. You're going to have to be really focused in on that. Don't be afraid to ask questions. It is designed to be hard. It is designed to challenge you. So there's no shame in needing the help, and that's why I'm here. All right, guys. Hope you guys got all through that stuff, and I will talk to you in a little bit. Enjoy your weekend, and enjoy it.